Gonna take a sacramental journey, gonna set my heart at ease. Gonna take a sacramental journey to renew old memories.
So, John Vedell, what a delight it's been to meet you and to get to know you. You are, I would have to say, you are the most unique former campus pastor that we are interviewing.
Oh my!
Because you are the living link that we found. You're like that missing skull in Kenya that they found. That missing link between Don Voigts, who was the first full-time Lutheran chaplain in Canada. He died in 1976, but he was your colleague counterpart in the western part of this country while you were initiating campus ministry in the eastern part of it. Your first call was to the Kenora area, to a congregation?
I had a 2-church parish, one out in the bush, one in town, and I enjoyed those 2 years that I was there so much.
And I seem to recall you had a reconnection with the student worker you met in Duluth and invited them up to Canada for a retreat or a meeting of some kind that you then wrote up an article about.
I got in touch with Bonnie and suggested that I could organize a retreat in the outskirts of Kenora on Lake Lulu, or better known as Lac Lou. And she gathered some students and came for the retreat. And went well. Soon after, I wrote an article for the Lutheran Companion about the retreat, a few pictures. Got a call from Otto, who had read the article, and based on that, remarkably, he asked if I would be interested in becoming the Eastern Regional Secretary for student work, campus work. That came out of the blue, but I thought about it and said, okay, give it a try, more adventure.
So Eastern Regional Secretary for Campus Ministry, covering a territory from Thunder Bay to St. John's, Newfoundland. That's quite a geographical area to cover, but you started out in Toronto. What was that like to initiate that campus ministry on the University of Toronto campus?
In Kenora, a young woman who had lived in Toronto gave me the address and the name of the owner of a very nice old brownstone house on Bedford Road. So I set up my one-room apartment, which was fairly large, to be a meeting room. And you can't do it now, according to Steve, but I got a list of Lutheran students, began contacting them, and began forming a small group of Lutheran students. And then we graduated to meeting mainly in Hart House. It all was well organized. My God, when we were doing the LSM Foundation meetings, he had outlines and ideas, and structures. I said, okay, it sounds good to me. Don was a colleague and a friend, and we would attend conferences. I remember one in Chester, Nova Scotia. And after the sessions, we'd go down to the bar and have a beer. And when he was in Montreal once, we went downtown to see a movie. and it was Easy Rider. I wanted a motorcycle.
Hello, my name is Phoebe Voigts, and I am happy to share these memories of Lutheran Campus Ministry in Edmonton on behalf of the family of Don and Winifred Voigts. As many of you will know, 65 years ago, my father, Don Voigts, became the first Lutheran campus pastor at the University of Alberta, which also made him the first Protestant campus pastor in Canada. For our family, it all started in 1956, when my father was serving as chaplain at Luther College and pastor of Christ Lutheran in Regina. As family lore tells it, he came home one day to tell my mum that the church was beginning a ministry to Lutheran students at colleges and universities in Canada, and they wanted him to become the first campus pastor at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. I don't know to what extent he was part of bringing about this church decision, but I expect he was very involved, because to Don Voigts, the dream that Lutheran ministry should be offered to university students who were away from home was part of his DNA. In that same conversation with my mum, or rather a bit later, it became clear to her that he, together with a friend and campus ministry supporter, Reverend Larry Riles, had mortgaged or sold pretty well everything we owned, which was not much at that time, in order to acquire a large house near the university, at that time right around where the hub is now. It was to be the Lutheran Student Center, a home away from home for Lutheran students. It was also going to be the home for our family. This was, I think, the first clue for my mom that what was publicly and formally recognized as a ministry by campus pastor Don Voigts was in practice a team ministry, which they took on together, and with kids in tow, a family project, you might say. The center of the ministry would be worship. As it turned out, the university library closed every evening at 9:30 p.m. Thus, evening vespers was scheduled every weeknight at 10 p.m. in the living room of our home, and it was well attended, with students filling our living room, often spread across the floor and standing along the walls. Let me ask you, can you imagine welcoming up to 50 university students in your home every night at 10 p.m.? Hungry university students? Lonely university students? Excited about their work and eager to talk university students? As kids, Fridays were the best days. We were not allowed to stay up for vespers during most school days, but we could on Fridays. This meant not only joining the worship, but having free reign on the spread of drinks and cookies, which were always available. The cookies, of course, were the result of my father's visits every Sunday to congregations throughout the province, where he would preach and be a one-person promo ad for Lutheran Campus Ministry, inviting congregations to join in this important work, including by sending cookies to the Lutheran Student Center and to the students who gathered there every night.
On campus, we would have events weekly on campus through the joint chaplaincy, and some very significant events. I remember one series, it was Jesus Christ, Why Believe? And that was the title. And in that particular series, we had John Montgomery, who was a professor at Vancouver somewhere. I think you'd know him, Ken, possibly. And Bob Bader, who was a professor at St. Andrews. They debated the issue on campus for all people. And we'd have around 200, 300 people at those sessions and debating issues. It was really quite good. Oh yeah, Marion, my wife just and reminded me, we had some pretty important people come to another type session. We had another session on cultural change and the church, cultural change in the church. And I remember one of the people was Dick Gregory, and I hosted him that time, and he was an interesting character, but he was speaking about cultural and racial issues in the United States and how it affected the church. We had Buffy St. Marie. She was speaking about music and the expression of faith. And we had Rennie Levesque, who spoke about the need for Canadian minorities to be able to have a voice. And then we had another Aboriginal leader from Sault Ste. Marie, but I just don't remember his name. He also was very informative, and that again was open to all the bodies in the university, including professors and students. Had good reception for those kinds of events. There were a number of those over the year. Oh, I should mention another thing that we did internally, which is really quite significant. Every Lent, our Vesper services for 1 week during Lent, Holy Week during Lent, would emphasize one way of expression. And in 1 year, I think it was 64, 65, we had a person by the name of Annie Lau. And during that week, she interpreted Handel's Messiah through dance. And then another year, we had Thea Batdorf from New Brunswick, Lunenburg, somewhere down there. She was an artist, and Don Voigts actually set that one up. She was a resident artist for the week and went from campus to campus. And then another year we had Carl Schut, who was another artist who would emphasize what the scripture was for that day in the painting that he made. So that was another way to bring faith and life together.
The next part of my story there in Toronto, Missouri Synod congregation on University Avenue had a beautiful church, as I recall. And the campus was named Fred Gum, G-U-M, I believe. And we discussed doing things together and no dice. And so we didn't do very much collaboration. And I got thinking naively, perhaps, that it didn't make sense for the church in general sense, to be devoting all those resources to one place when Fred already had a good program going. So I thought it over, and I had quite a bit of autonomy as I look back, and decided to go to London now for University of Western Ontario.
Gonna take a sacramental journey, gonna set my heart at ease. Gonna take a sacramental journey to renew old memories.
Word, world, and sacrament, if I recall correctly, was a title of a very early, they finally published it as a book.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, it was they were, I think, 3 or 4 speeches at a student conference shortly after I became campus minister. It was like, 1962 or 63, something like that. And the author was William Klebsch, Klebsch, an Anglican priest who, again, turned my perceptions upside down. He was terrific. This was the summer that Marilyn Monroe died. And he said Marilyn Monroe did not commit suicide. He said what happened was a nice little girl from Ohio by the name of Norma Jean Baker was murdered by Marilyn Monroe. And he used that as a metaphor with religion and faith. And he said, faith is always at the point of being murdered by its religious expression. And ain't it a shame? Does it have to be that way? I would say religion, quote unquote, there are four things that make up religion: creed, code, cult, and constitution. Creed, that's your belief, your doctrines, your dogmas, your value system. What is it that you value? Code, that's your code of conduct, your ethical system, the way you put what you believe into action. 3, cult, that's a word from religious studies, and it means how you ritualize all of. And even constitution, how do you give it political shape? Do you have bishops? Do you have presidents? I say only partly in jest that Jesus says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there you will find me. And there you will also find a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. I mean, that's simply the way humans arrange themselves. Now, creed, code, cult, and constitution, each one of those 4 things can murder faith. And that's terrible. It does not have to be that way. And I think our job as pastors is to see to it that it doesn't happen, that our creed, our value system is transparent to faith, that our ethics is transparent to faith, that our cult, our rituals, our ceremonies, they are transparent to faith. Even our political system.
We go way back, don't we, Ken?
Well, back to the 60s, I think. You entered the ministry in the 50s. I didn't enter till the 60s, but we're about 10 years different.
Oh, you were active with the origins of the LSMC, was it?
LSMC, yes. Yeah, I was a student at UBC.
Yeah.
And then you started in campus ministry. And then I was a little bit on the negotiations to, develop from the LSAA to the Lutheran Student Movement in Canada. And I edited the first magazine, a national magazine at that time too.
Yes, hello all. My name is Pastor Ken Kuhn. I was involved as a student in campus ministry at the University of British Columbia. And then after a time in Calgary, when Paul Schmidt and I overlapped, in fact, for a while, I was called to the University of Alberta in Edmonton, where I served as a campus minister there for about 9 years.
Hello, I'm Stephen Larson, and I'm also pleased to be a part of this interview with H. Paul Schmidt. As our paths cross again, Paul, after some decades, I've been involved in campus ministry since grade 1, when I lived in the Lutheran Student Center at the Oregon State University in Corvallis, where my father was serving as campus pastor. And years later, I was serving as the campus chaplain at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And campus ministry, I blame campus ministry for keeping me in the church. It helped me at significant points in my life's faith journey, and I am deeply grateful to campus ministry and those who have been a part of campus ministry.
And then they placed me at Southern Illinois University as the chaplain there, a student chaplain, I guess I would be at that stage. But when I arrived in Carbondale, Illinois, the resident pastor there, who was to be my supervisor, informed me that the town of Carbondale had 13,000 people. The university had 13,000 students. He would take the town, I would take the gown. And so I had a delightful year there. I started a Lutheran student group, loosely connected with Gamma Delta, though we had almost nothing to do with that. I had Bible classes, counseling. I brought together 30, 40 students that would meet regularly. Organized a motorcycle club, by the way, in the basement of the building that the district had purchased. The campus didn't allow cars within 2 miles, so motorcycles were all over. And then I went back, graduated from the seminary, and still wasn't convinced that I wanted to go into ministry. Of course, my image was basically parish ministry. But one evening in our evening devotions, one of the lowly first-year students at the seminary, I was a fourth-year student, he was a first-year student. He just went through the biblical examples of people who gave a lot of excuses about not answering the call from God. And then he said, "What are our excuses?" "Amen, let's go." And that night I kind of said, "Okay, God, maybe 8, 10 years, then we'll reevaluate it." My call was half-time in the campus ministry, but at that time there had been some agreement with the Lutherans in Canada. And so when I was then installed as campus chaplain and missionary at large, it took place in Mount Calvary Lutheran Church, downtown Calgary, right in the center of the city. And Pastor Alfred Meyer was the pastor there. He was also the district president, the ABC district, Alberta, British Columbia district president of Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. And the evening that was my installation, there were very few people at the church, but Pastor Don Olson from Hope Lutheran Church, LCA, in Calgary, was preaching the sermon. And Pastor Alfred Meyer shared with me before the service, he said he was uncomfortable having an LCA pastor preach in his pulpit there at Mount Calgary. But because the district council and the agreement among Lutherans had come to that agreement, and he was going to honor that. And so we proceeded with my commissioning, with Don Olson participating, preaching the sermon, participating, and with other people that I hardly knew, some from the probably ELCC at that time. And I then was sponsored by all Lutherans. I think I may have been the first Lutheran chaplain in North America who was sponsored by all of the 3 main Lutheran groups at that time.
So then McGill, Montreal, how did that happen?
Well, I think it was in consultation with Don Voigts, and he suggested Montreal. That was a pretty big decision. In April, I had married Barbara, and so as a new bride, she agreed to join that adventure, and off to Montreal. By then, I had a reliable Volkswagen Beetle. So I forget exactly how, well, again, contact pastor and congregations, formed a foundation.
Gonna take a sacramental journey, gonna set my heart at ease. Gonna take a sacramental journey to renew old memories. Dick and Don are gonna tell us how to get our Lutheran act in gear. Gonna take a sacramental journey here. Paul will lead us all in worship. Bart will take us through the Bible. We're in friendly Manitoba, attaché, we'll boogie away, etc.
Don was a very interesting guy. I remember I did my internship in campus ministry in Halifax, and one of the great traumas of my internship was Don had to get to the airport. And as you know, Halifax, the airport's about a half an hour away. And I don't know what happened, but he was a bit late and I was a bit, slow on getting through the city. And we just made it. And I remember him literally doing the 100-yard dash to the gate to catch his plane. But he was a very wonderful guy. He came twice to visit us and visit campus ministry in Halifax. And to be honest with you, among the other chaplains that were full-time and were not interns there in the other churches, Lutheran Campus Ministry was highly respected across the country because of the work Don Voigts did.
Hi, I'm Emma, and I was a member of the Lutheran student movement for 5 years.
Hi, I'm Tom Herein, and I served on the LCM Council for several terms while I was a professor at the University of Alberta.
Hi, I'm Dr. Diane Herein. We were associated, both my husband and I, at the University of Alberta when we were professors, and we're probably some of the oldies on this mosaic because we started working with LCME in the 70s and it continued through the 90s.
I'm Chris Nissen, and I was president of the Lutheran Student Movement in 1999, and I later served on the LCM Council in the early 2000s.
My name is Janet Storch, formerly Janet Hennig, when I was a student nurse at the University of Alberta between the years of 1958 to 63.
Hi, my name is Andrea Wilhelm, and I served on the council of the Lutheran Campus Ministry Edmonton from 2013 to 2019.
Hi, we're Kari
and Dennis Heiss, LSM alumni from 1991 till 99. Yes, we still came after we were married and had our first child.
Yay for Campus Ministry.